The unexpected meeting. It was a quiet night in the small town. The streets were empty, and the houses were dark. The air was cool, and the only sound was the soft wind moving through the trees. Inside his home, Daniel sat alone, reading. He liked quiet nights. He liked being away from noise and problems. But tonight, something strange was waiting for him outside. Daniel heard a faint sound. At first he thought it was only the wind. But then he heard it again. A soft cry. A weak voice. It was not like anything he had heard before. It was not a dog, not a cat, and not a human voice either. It was something different. Something that made his heart beat faster. He stood up and walked to the window. The yard was dark, but he saw a shadow move near the old shed. The cry came again, low and painful, almost like a child asking for help. Daniel felt a chill down his back. He thought about ignoring it. He thought about locking the door and pretending it was nothing. But the sound did not stop. It pulled at him again and again until he could not ignore it anymore. Slowly, he opened the back door and stepped outside. The grass was wet under his feet. The moonlight showed just enough to see the shed. His steps were quiet, but his heart was loud. Each beat sounded like a drum in his chest. When he reached the shed, he saw something move in the corner. It was small, curled up, almost like a child hiding. Daniel froze. His breath caught in his throat. Then, as his eyes adjusted, he saw her. It was not a human girl. Her skin was pale, almost silver in the moonlight. Her eyes were large and bright, glowing faintly like stars. Her hair was thin and strange, almost like soft threads of light. She looked weak, shaking as if she had not eaten in days. Her hands clutched her stomach, and her lips trembled as she tried to speak. Daniel stepped back in shock. His first thought was to run. His mind screamed, "This is not possible. This is not real." But his heart did not move. He could not leave. The girl looked too fragile, too hungry, too lost. She opened her mouth, and a weak sound came out. Not human words, but a soft plea. Her eyes locked on him, full of fear and hope at the same time. Daniel felt something stir inside him. She was not just an alien. She was a child. A hungry, scared child. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring at her. The night was silent, but inside him, questions were loud. Where did she come from? Why was she here? Was she dangerous? Was someone looking for her? But when she reached out one trembling hand, all his fear faded. She was asking for help, not harm. Daniel knelt slowly, showing her he meant no danger. "Are you hungry?" he asked softly, even though he knew she might not understand. Her head tilted, but her eyes followed his voice. She touched her stomach again, then nodded weakly. That simple gesture broke the wall between them. She was not here to hurt him. She was here because she needed help. Daniel took a deep breath, then stood. "Wait here," he said gently, pointing to the ground so she would understand. "I'll bring food." He walked back to the house, his mind racing. His hands shook as he opened the fridge. He grabbed bread, fruit, and a bottle of water. He wondered if alien bodies could even eat human food. But he had no choice. He had to try. When he returned, the girl was still there, watching him carefully. Her eyes widened at the sight of the food. Daniel sat down on the ground, placing the bread and fruit in front of her. Slowly, carefully, she reached out. Her fingers were thin and strange, but when she held the bread, it looked almost normal. She took a bite, then another. The fear in her eyes softened, replaced by relief. She ate as if she had not eaten in days. Daniel watched in silence. 100 questions filled his mind, but none mattered right now. What mattered was that she was alive and she was eating. After a few minutes, she stopped. She looked at him again, her eyes softer now. She placed her hand over her chest as if to say, "Thank you." Daniel nodded slowly. He wanted to ask her name, but he knew it was too soon. The night was still quiet, but inside Daniel's world, everything had changed. This was not just a quiet night anymore. This was the night he met someone not from Earth. This was the night he gave food to a hungry alien girl. He did not know it yet, but this simple act would change his life forever. Asterisk, the first act of kindness. The night air carried a stillness, but Daniel's mind was a storm. Inside his chest, his heart pounded louder than the crickets outside. He stood there in the yard, watching the strange girl chew on the last piece of bread he had given her. She ate slowly now, as though she was savoring every crumb, as though every bite was a treasure. Her large eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, reflecting something Daniel could not explain. They were not only alien, they were alive with gratitude. He could see it in the way she blinked slowly, the way her trembling hands calmed as she held the food carefully, almost with reverence. Daniel crouched down again, keeping his voice gentle. "Do you understand me?" he asked. He didn't expect an answer. And yet, the girl tilted her head, as though she recognized the sound of his concern, even if she didn't know the words. She pressed her hand against her chest again, that same gesture she made before. A silent thank you. For a moment, Daniel felt the fear wash away. She wasn't a monster. She wasn't here to hurt him. She was a lost child, and she was alone. He opened the bottle of water and placed it in front of her. She hesitated at first, looking at it with confusion. Daniel unscrewed the cap, took a small sip himself, then set it back in front of her. She watched closely, imitating his action, bringing the bottle to her lips. The first sip made her eyes widen. She drank greedily, as though water itself was magic. When she finished, she sat back against the wall of the shed, her small body relaxing. For the first time, her breathing steadied and her glowing eyes softened as if some invisible weight had lifted from her shoulders. Daniel, however, felt the opposite. His mind filled with heavy questions. Who is she? Where did she come from? Why is she here? And what happens if someone else finds her? He imagined what the world would do if it discovered her. Scientists would take her away, governments would hide her, people would fear her. She would be treated like an experiment, not a child. The thought made Daniel's stomach turn. The girl suddenly made a soft sound, something between a whisper and a hum. Daniel looked at her, and she repeated it, pointing at the empty bread wrapper. He realized it must be her way of asking for more. He smiled faintly. Hungry, huh? This time, she didn't nod or gesture. Instead, she mimicked his word. Her mouth formed a strange sound awkwardly. Gry. Daniel froze. His breath caught in his throat. She was trying to copy him, to learn. She was intelligent, far more than he first thought. His fear returned, but not the kind that made him want to run. This fear was different. It was the weight of knowing he was standing on the edge of something world-changing. He stood, went back inside the house, and gathered more food. He chose fruit this time, thinking it might be easier for her. When he returned, she reached for it eagerly, but then stopped, waiting for his nod. She was learning manners too. He nodded slowly, and she smiled. At least, he thought it was a smile. As she ate, Daniel sat down nearby. He didn't want to crowd her, but he also didn't want to leave her alone. He studied her face carefully. Her features were strange, yet familiar enough to remind him of a child lost in the world. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the sound of her chewing. When she finally finished, she looked at him again. Her hand went to her chest, then she pointed at him. Who, man? Daniel blinked. She had spoken again. This time she wasn't repeating what he said. She was naming him, identifying what he was. Yes, he said softly, placing a hand on his chest. Human. She tilted her head, her glowing eyes narrowing in thought. Then she touched her chest and made a sound he couldn't understand. It was short, musical, almost like a name. Daniel realized with a shiver. She was telling him who she was, but before he could repeat it, before he could even try to say her name, the girl's expression changed. She looked toward the dark sky. Her ears, or what looked like them, twitching slightly. Her eyes widened in fear. She stood quickly, her thin frame trembling again. Daniel followed her gaze. The night sky was clear, but distant flashes of light danced across the stars, faint and quick, like a silent storm far away. He didn't know if it was lightning, meteors, or something else. But the girl clearly recognized it. She grabbed the empty water bottle and the leftover food, clutching them tightly against her chest. Then, with one last look at Daniel, she stepped back into the shadows. Her glowing eyes lingered for a moment, shining like small lanterns in the dark. Daniel wanted to stop her, to tell her she was safe here. But the words never left his mouth. In the blink of an eye, she turned and vanished into the trees. Her steps so light they made no sound. The yard was silent again. Only the wind whispered through the leaves. Daniel stood there, frozen, the night colder than before. He had fed a hungry alien child. He had seen her speak. He had learned her name. And then she was gone, but deep inside, he knew this was not the end. She would come back. Something in her eyes had told him that. Something in the way she clutched the food, the water, the memory of kindness. Something said she wasn't finished with him yet. And Daniel, though still afraid, felt a strange hope. A hope that whatever was coming next, he was part of it now. He took a deep breath. If you stay, you must promise me something. You must stay hidden. No one can know you're here. The mother's eyes softened. She lowered her head, an unspoken agreement. The girl, too, nodded eagerly, her face lighting up with something close to joy. But Daniel wasn't finished. His voice shook as he continued. If anyone finds you, if anyone sees you, I can't protect you. The mother stepped closer. She placed her hand over his chest, right where his heart beat rapidly under his shirt. Her touch was cool, but her eyes burned with meaning. You protect. You already protect. Daniel froze. Her words pierced him deeper than he expected. She was right. From the moment he gave food to the girl, he had already chosen a side. He had already begun to protect them, even without realizing it. He closed his eyes. There was no turning back now. All right, he whispered. You can stay. I'll help you. But we must be careful. The girl let out a small cry of happiness, rushing forward to wrap her arms around him again. He stiffened at first, then relaxed, letting the fragile embrace wash over him. The mother watched in silence, her expression unreadable, but her eyes glistened faintly under the moonlight dot. As the night grew colder, Daniel led them into the shed. It was small and dusty, but it would serve as a shelter for now. He gave them blankets, old ones he hadn't used in years, and another bottle of water. The girl curled up quickly, exhaustion pulling her into sleep. The mother, however, remained standing. Her gaze stayed fixed on Daniel. He met her eyes and felt the silent message there. Gratitude, trust, but also warning. She trusted him, yes, but she was also reminding him of the responsibility he had just accepted. Daniel sat on the steps outside the shed, staring at the sky. His mind wouldn't rest. Every choice he had ever made seemed small compared to the one he had just taken. The stars glittered above, silent witnesses to his decision. Somewhere out there, their world had been destroyed. Somewhere out there, an entire people might have been lost. And now, 2 survivors were here in his yard, under his protection. The night stretched on, heavy with silence. Daniel wondered if he had done the right thing. Fear gnawed at him, whispering about the dangers that might come. But then he heard the soft breathing of the girl inside, peaceful for the first time since he had met her. And in that moment, fear stepped aside, because he realized something else. No matter the risks, no matter the danger, humanity was about choices, and tonight he had chosen kindness. He didn't know what the future would bring. He didn't know how long he could keep them hidden. But he knew one thing for certain. He would not let them face this world alone. Asterisk. The bond between worlds' morning sunlight spilled across Daniel's yard, but it felt different now. The shed at the edge of his property was no longer just a place to store tools. It had become something else. A shelter. A secret. Inside, the alien girl stirred awake, her glowing eyes fluttering open as she looked around. Her mother stood nearby, silent as ever, watching her daughter with quiet care. Daniel lingered at the doorway, unsure of how to begin this strange new day. He carried a tray bread, fruit, and water. His hands shook slightly as he set it down on an old crate. The girl's face brightened, and she hurried forward, grabbing a piece of fruit with eager hands. She bit into it with a soft hum of joy. Daniel smiled faintly. "Slow down, there's more where that came from." The girl paused, tilting her head at him, her silver hair catching the sunlight. She tried to mimic his words. "Slow down." Her voice was broken, but her attempt was clear. Daniel blinked. She was learning faster than he expected. Every word she repeated sounded stronger, more confident. The mother stepped forward, her tall frame casting a shadow. She looked at the food carefully, then at Daniel. Finally she spoke. "Safe?" Her voice was low, uneven, but the word was sharp. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Safe for now." The mother's gaze lingered on him, searching, as though testing whether she could trust his words. At last she gave a small nod and her posture relaxed. Shared lessons, the next few days settled into a strange rhythm. Each morning, Daniel brought food and water. Each night, the girl and her mother remained hidden in the shed, speaking softly in their own language when they thought he wasn't listening. But slowly, things changed. The girl began to spend more time outside, following Daniel as he worked. In the yard, she watched him cut wood, fix tools, and even cook. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity at everything he did. One afternoon, Daniel handed her a pencil and paper. "Draw," he said gently, making a small sketch of a tree. She stared at the paper, then at him, then carefully began to copy the shape. Her hands shook, but the lines formed slowly. When she finished, she looked at him with pride. Daniel chuckled softly. "Good, very good." She repeated the word, "good." It became their game. He would show her a word, and she would try to repeat it. Sometimes she struggled, but each time she improved. It was as if she was thirsty not just for food, but for knowledge. The mother remained quieter. She watched everything, her sharp eyes never missing a detail. At first, she only spoke in broken words. But over time, she too began to practice. When Daniel offered her water one evening, she whispered, "Thanks." The sound of that word, simple but full of meaning, sent a shiver down his spine. Stories without words. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Daniel sat outside with them. The girl curled close to her mother, chewing on a piece of bread, while Daniel lit a small fire in a metal barrel to keep them warm. For a while, no one spoke. Then the mother pointed toward the stars. She made a sound, long and soft, almost like a song. Daniel couldn't understand, but the sadness in her voice was clear. The girl listened quietly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. Then she pointed at the sky too and whispered something in their language. Daniel guessed it was the name of their home. He followed her gaze, staring at the endless stars. He felt a lump in his throat. They had lost everything, yet here they were, sitting in his backyard, trying to find pieces of life again. Daniel picked up a stick and drew a circle in the dirt. He pointed to himself. "Earth," he said. Then he pointed at them. "Home?" The girl's eyes lit. She drew a smaller circle next to his and whispered a word, her voice trembling. Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder, and for a moment, silence covered them all. Daniel realized they weren't just strangers anymore. They were sharing more than food. They were sharing their pain, their hope, and their stories even without full language. Growing trust days turned into a week. The girl laughed more often now, a soft musical sound that filled Daniel's chest with warmth. She tried new words daily: water, bread, safe, friend. Each one made her eyes sparkle brighter. The mother, though still cautious, began helping Daniel too. One morning, when she saw him struggling to repair a broken fence, she stepped forward. Without speaking, she lifted one side of the heavy wood while he hammered it back into place. Their eyes met, and for the first time, she gave him something close to a smile. Trust was growing, slowly but surely. But along with it came danger. Unseen eyes. Late one night, Daniel sat at his desk, trying to rest, when headlights swept across his yard. He froze. A car slowed near his property, its engine humming softly before it rolled away. His chest tightened. Neighbors rarely came this way at night. What if someone had seen the girl outside? What if rumors started? The next morning, he warned them. "You must stay hidden. No one can see you." He made the gesture of covering his eyes and shaking his head, hoping they understood. The mother nodded firmly. "Hide." But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that someone had already noticed something. The bond deepens that evening. As the girl practiced more words with him, she suddenly touched his arm and whispered, "Family." Daniel froze. He hadn't taught her that word. She must have heard it from somewhere, maybe on the small radio he sometimes played. He looked into her glowing eyes. For her, family wasn't just a word. It was everything she had left. And somehow she now saw him as part of it. The mother said nothing, but her eyes softened as she watched. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected to become more than a protector. But now, he was becoming something else, someone they depended on. Someone they trusted. And in that trust, a bond formed that crossed the boundaries of worlds, foreshadow of storm as the night deepened. Daniel stepped outside, staring at the stars again. The girl had called him family. The mother had begun to trust him. Their bond was growing stronger each day, but above, faint streaks of light flickered across the sky once more. Not meteors. Not ordinary stars. Something else. Daniel's gut twisted. He knew this peace couldn't last forever. Somewhere, out there in the dark, other eyes were watching. The days after the headlights passed Daniel's property were uneasy. Every creak of the floor, every bark of a dog in the distance, every car engine along the road made his chest tighten. He had kept his quiet life for years, but now it felt fragile, like thin glass that could shatter at any moment. The shed at the edge of the yard no longer seemed safe enough. He checked it 3 times each night, making sure the door was closed, making sure no one had followed the girl and her mother. But the unease never left him. Inside the shed, life was changing too. The girl laughed more, practiced her words more, and sometimes even sang softly in a language Daniel could not understand. Her mother remained watchful, but even she had begun to lower her guard. Daniel had become their shelter, their wall against a world they could not trust. But safety was an illusion, and Daniel knew it. The stranger at the door one morning, Daniel, was pouring coffee when a knock came at the front door. His hands froze. Nobody ever visited him unannounced. He walked slowly to the door, his breath caught in his chest. When he opened it, a man stood there. Dressed in plain clothes, his smile was too sharp, too practiced. "Morning," the man said. "Sorry to bother you. Name's Harris. I'm with the county survey." Daniel frowned. "Survey?" "Yeah," Harris replied casually, pulling a small notepad from his pocket. "We've had some reports. Strange lights, noises in the woods, things like that. Just checking if you've seen anything unusual out here." Daniel's stomach turned. Reports. Someone had noticed. He forced a neutral smile. "No, nothing unusual. Just quiet nights, same as always." Harris studied him carefully, his eyes scanning the house. the yard, lingering a moment too long on the shed. Mind if I look around? Daniel's heart skipped. His voice tightened. That's private property. The man chuckled softly. Of course, just routine. You understand. He tipped his hat and walked back to his car, but his glance over his shoulder was sharp. Too sharp. Daniel shut the door, his hands shaking. He knew then. They were running out of time. The hidden discussion that night. Daniel sat in the shed with the mother and daughter. His voice was low, urgent. They're looking. Someone came here today, asking questions. If they find you, he stopped, swallowing the lump in his throat. If they find you, it's over. The girl tilted her head, not fully understanding, but sensing his fear. The mother, however, understood enough. She stepped closer, her eyes hard. Danger? Yes, Daniel said firmly. Danger. People will not help. They will take you, study you, lock you away. The mother's expression darkened. She looked down at her daughter, then back at him. For a long time, silence hung between them. Finally she whispered, You. Decide. Daniel blinked. Me? You choose, she said, her voice heavy with meaning. Protect or end. The words cut deep. Protect or end. It was not only a choice for them, it was a choice for him. His life, his peace, his safety. If he chose to protect them, there was no going back. If he turned them in, his fear would end. But so would their freedom. The girl crawled closer, holding out the piece of paper where she had drawn her crooked sketches of trees and stars. She pointed at him and whispered the words she had learned. Only days ago, family. Daniel felt something break inside him. The inner storm. That night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind was a storm of voices. If you keep them, you risk everything. If you hide them, you'll be hunted. If you let them go, they'll die. If you tell the truth, they'll never see freedom again. He thought of Harris's sharp smile, of the neighbors' curious glances, of the strange streaks of light in the sky. But he also thought of the girl's laughter, the way she tried to copy his words, the way she called him family. And he thought of the mother's eyes, tired, sorrowful, but full of strength. Eyes that carried the weight of a lost world. By dawn, Daniel knew there was no real choice. His heart had already decided. The promise. He returned to the shed with food, but his face was solemn. The girl rushed to him, smiling brightly, but her mother noticed his mood and stood still, waiting. Daniel took a breath. I will protect you. Both of you, no matter what. The girl clapped softly, not fully understanding the risk, only the promise. The mother stepped forward. Her eyes locked with his, and for the first time she said a word without hesitation. Trust. Daniel nodded. Yes, trust. It was more than a word. It was a bond sealed in the quiet dawn. Preparation. Over the next days, Daniel made changes. He cleared out the shed, building a false wall to hide them if anyone came. He bought extra supplies from a store farther away, careful not to raise suspicion. He taught them more words, simple phrases that might help if danger came quickly. Girl learned fast. Hide, she whispered one evening, pulling a blanket over her head with a playful grin. Her mother smiled faintly, though the sadness in her eyes never faded. But even with these preparations, Daniel knew it was only a matter of time. Harris would be back. Others would come. The streaks in the sky would not remain unnoticed forever. Silent alarm. One evening, as Daniel sat with them near the fire, the mother suddenly stiffened. Her head turned sharply toward the sky. The girl followed, her glowing eyes wide with fear. Daniel looked up. At first he saw nothing. Then he heard it, a low, distant hum, almost mechanical. It grew louder, vibrating through the air. The mother whispered something in her own language, pulling the girl close. Her eyes blazed with urgency. She looked at Daniel and said one word he had never heard from her before. Hunters. Daniel's blood ran cold. The hum grew louder, then faded into the distance. Silence returned, but the mother did not relax. She kept her daughter pressed against her, her body trembling with old fear. Daniel realized then that the danger wasn't only from humans on Earth. Something else was searching. Something from beyond the sky. The choice made that night, Daniel walked outside, staring at the stars. The air was cool, the world quiet, but inside him, everything burned. He thought about leaving, running away, cutting ties before the storm arrived. But the image of the girl clutching her drawings, whispering, "Family," crushed that thought. He thought of the mother's plea, her single word, trust. And he knew he would protect them, not just from the world of men, but from whatever hunted them across the stars. The choice was made. Daniel was no longer just a man living in a quiet town. He was the guardian of something bigger, something fragile and precious. And in his heart, though fear still lived, another feeling grew stronger: resolve. Because sometimes humanity is not about safety. Sometimes it is about standing between the innocent and the storm. The ending twist: the next morning rose gray and quiet, but Daniel felt the world leaning forward, listening. He checked the yard, the road, the tree line. Nothing moved. Still his skin prickled. Danger was close. He could feel it like a cold hand on the back of his neck. Inside the shed, the mother stood with calm eyes. The girl sat on the floor with her paper and pencil, drawing stars and circles, earth and home, side by side. When Daniel entered, she looked up and smiled. It was small and brave, the kind of smile people make when they want others not to worry. "Good morning," Daniel said softly. "Good morning," the girl repeated. Her words were clearer every day. The mother nodded once. "Safe?" she asked. "For now," Daniel answered, "but we must be ready." He showed them the hidden panel he had built behind the shelves. It looked like part of the wall, but behind it was a narrow space large enough for the two of them to crouch. He had lined it with blankets and placed a water bottle inside. He had even drawn a small arrow near the floor, invisible unless you knew where to look. "Hide," he said, pointing to the panel. "Only if I say, only if danger comes inside." The mother's eyes moved across every detail. She touched the edge of the panel, testing its strength. At last she said, "Good," the girl whispered. "Hide. Family safe." Daniel's throat tightened. "Yes," he said. "Family safe." Shadows on the road by afternoon. Clouds had covered the sun. The road outside lay quiet, but not empty. A van rolled by slow, no company logo, no farm dust on its sides. Too clean for this area. It passed Daniel's gate, stopped a few houses down, then turned around and crept back the other way. Daniel watched from the curtain. His heart pounded. The van did not stop this time, but a small shape flickered in its window, something like a lens, shining for a second. A camera. They were looking for something. They were looking for someone. He moved quickly, almost running across the yard to the shed. "Hide," he said, breathless. "Now." The mother's face did not change, but the girl flinched. Daniel lifted the shelf, slid the panel, and helped them inside. The girl gripped his sleeve for a second, her fingers cold and small. "Come back," she whispered. "I will," he said. "Stay quiet, no sound." He closed the panel. The shelf fell back into place. The shed looked ordinary again, dusty. Tools, old boxes, nothing more. He had just stepped away when he heard it. Tires on gravel, a door slam, and then voices. Not one voice, several. "Spread out," a man said. "Check yards. Talk if needed." Daniel swallowed hard and walked out into the open. He could not look like a man with a secret. He had to look like a man with nothing to hide. 3 figures approached. 2 wore plain clothes. One had a badge clipped inside his jacket. The first man smiled, that same practice smile. "Harris." "Afternoon," Harris called. "Mind if we ask a couple more questions, Mr. Daniel, right?" Daniel nodded. "Sure." Harris glanced toward the shed. Busy day? Just fixing things, Daniel said. Old place needs old hands. Harris laughed like they were friends. You ever think about moving into town? Less to fix. Not my style. The second man walked closer to the shed. He pretended to study the fence, but his eyes scanned the door, the windows, the ground. He was trained. He was hunting. Strange lights again last night, Harris said, like it was small talk. Neighbors called it in. Said they heard a hum too. You hear it? Daniel kept his face still. No hum, no lights. Funny, Harris said, voice light. Because your neighbor down the road swears the lights were over this side. He tilted his head. Mind if we take a look around the shed? Daniel's mouth went dry. You got a warrant? Harris's smile thinned. We can get one. Then you'll come back, Daniel said. A long second passed. The air held its breath. Harris turned to the second man, then back to Daniel. We're just doing our job. If you see anything unusual, anything that doesn't belong, call this number. He handed Daniel a card. The card had a number. No department name. They left. The van crept on. But Daniel knew this was not the end. It was the warning before the storm. He waited until the sound of the engine faded. Then he returned to the shed and opened the panel. The girl crawled out first. Eyes wide, face pale. The mother followed, moving slowly, listening for danger, even as the silence returned. They will return, the mother said. Not a question. Yes, Daniel said. Soon. The girl touched his sleeve again. Family, she whispered, as if that one word could hold him together. He nodded. Family. The signal night fell fast, thick and dark. Daniel kept the lights off. He moved through the house by memory. In the yard, the shed stood like a small island, quiet and still. He thought of moving them into the basement for a while, but the shed had the false wall, and the basement did not. It was safer here if anything in this new life could be called safe. Around midnight, the hum returned. It was faint at first, like a thought. Then it grew, spreading across the air in a low wave. Daniel ran outside. The mother was already there, standing in the doorway, her eyes sharp with fear. Hunters? Daniel asked. Maybe, she said. Or call. Call. He echoed. She lifted her hand toward the sky. Her voice was tight. Someone calls, not us. The hum rose, then fell, then repeated. It was like a code, long, short, never the same pattern twice, but not random either. Daniel felt the hairs on his arms lift as if the air itself had turned to static. The girl stepped out, clutching her drawings. She stared up into the dark and whispered a word from her language, a word full of longing. The mother put a hand on her shoulder and shook her head. No, the hum cut off. Silence dropped like a curtain. Then, a point of pale light flared high above the tree line, too bright for a star, too steady for a plane. It hovered, small but clear, like an eye opening. At the edge of the world. The girl took a step forward. The mother pulled her back. Daniel stood between them in the open yard, as if his body could be a wall. The light pulsed once, twice, 3 times. And Daniel, who knew nothing of star languages, felt it like a heartbeat. Is it them? He asked. The mother did not answer. Her face had changed. Fear, yes, but something else too. Hope, pain, memory. The light pulsed again, and from the woods behind the shed came the sudden crack of a branch. Not from above. From here. Daniel spun around. Shadows moved between the trees, quiet, fast, purposeful. 3 shapes, low to the ground, slipping across the leaves without a sound. Inside, Daniel said. Now. They ran into the shed. The mother pulled the girl into the hidden space. Daniel dropped the shelf and pressed the panel closed. He grabbed a hammer, the only thing at hand that felt like a weapon, and stepped back, forcing himself to breathe slow. Footsteps padded outside, light, precise. The shed door creaked. A line of pale light traced the floor. Someone had opened it. Daniel stood still, heart pounding. A figure slipped inside, then another, then a third. Their movements were smooth, like water, not human. Not like the mother and child either. Smaller, armor-like skin. Eyes like ice. The first figure raised a narrow device that clicked softly as it scanned the room. It paused on the shelf, but the device gave no alarm. The false wall held. Cold world. A thin voice whispered, using English poorly but precisely. Trace weak. The scent ends here. Another voice answered, colder. The child must be near. The mother will not run far. Daniel stayed where he was, the hammer level with his thigh. If they turned the shelf, if they saw the seam, it would be over in seconds. The first one paced slowly, the scanner passing inches from Daniel's chest. The device chirped a small sound, curious, not certain. The figure turned its head toward him. Human, it said softly. You will not be harmed. Step away. Daniel did not move. There's nothing here but tools, he said. Leave. The figure studied him. You shelter them. Who? The lost, the broken. It paused. They bring ruin. They bring hunters. They bring war. Daniel's grip tightened on the hammer. They bring a child who is hungry, he said. They bring a mother who wants a safe place to sleep. The figure's eyes narrowed. For a second, no one breathed. Then a new voice cut through the shed, a sound like wind over metal, vibrating the walls. The figures froze, their devices flashing. The voice spoke in their language, fast and sharp. Orders. All three stiffened. The leader hissed, withdraw. They slipped out as quietly as they came. The door remained open. Night air flowed in, cool and wet. The pale light above the trees pulsed once more, then dimmed and vanished. The hum did not return. Daniel waited. A long minute. Then another. He lowered the hammer, legs shaking. He lifted the shelf and pulled the panel open. The girl fell forward into his arms, eyes wide, breath fast. The mother climbed out behind her, silent, steady, her hands shaking as she placed them on her daughter's shoulders. They were not the same as you, Daniel said. Not like you, the mother nodded. Hunters, she said. But not from our sky, from many skies. Daniel stared at her. How many worlds? Enough, she said softly. Enough to break a home, and enough to chase those who flee. The girl pressed her drawing to Daniel's chest. A star. A small circle. And then, something new. She had added 3 sharp lines behind the circle, like claws on a door. Daniel knelt. We can't stay here, he said. They know the trail leads to this place. They will come back with more. The mother looked toward the road, then to the house, then up at the blank sky where the strange light had hung. Where? She asked. Daniel's answer surprised even him. Somewhere noisy. Somewhere crowded. A place where we look like no one special. City lights hide many stars. The mother held his gaze. Danger there too. Yes, he said. But danger everywhere. Now we choose our danger. And we choose our friends. The girl touched the drawing again and whispered, family. Daniel stood. Pack what you can. He fetched a small backpack, water, bread, 2 blankets, a flashlight. He wrapped the girl's drawings and slid them inside like they were the most important maps on Earth. They stepped into the night together. The road lay dark and long. In the distance, the town glowed faintly, a broken line of lights against the low clouds. Daniel led them to the truck. He opened the door. The girl climbed in and hugged the backpack. The mother paused beside Daniel. You made choice, she said. Big one. He managed a thin smile. Humans are stubborn. We don't drop what matters. She studied him for a heartbeat, then nodded. Humans are special, she said, choosing the word with care. The engine turned. The truck rolled forward. tires whispering on the road. The shed grew smaller in the mirrors, then vanished behind the trees. A chapter closed, but as they reached the edge of town, another sound rose, a soft ping from the truck's old radio, though it was off. The dial flickered. A voice, thin and distant, spoke a single word in the girl's language. The girl sat up straight, eyes bright. She whispered the same word back, pressing her fingers to the glass. "What is it?" Daniel asked. The mother stared at the radio, then at the sky. Her voice was a whisper he almost missed. "Not hunters," she said. "Answer?" Daniel repeated. She nodded. "A reply to a call we did not send." The radio crackled again, 3 tones. The same rhythm. The light had pulsed above the trees. The mother closed her eyes. A tear shone on her cheek, silver in the dashboard glow. "From who?" Daniel asked softly. The mother opened her eyes. In them, fear and hope burned together. "From those who survived, not many." She looked at the girl, then at Daniel. "They followed the kindness." "Your kindness, they followed you." The girl smiled, small and bright. "Family, bigger." Daniel stared at the road ahead, at the town lights, at the dark beyond. Somewhere above, old enemies circled. Somewhere far, new friends were reaching back through the night. He tightened his hands on the wheel. "Then we find a place to hide," he said, "and we make a plan." The truck rolled on into the quiet city glow. Behind them, the hum did not return. Above them, the sky held its secrets. And in the crackle of a stubborn old radio, a fragile future spoke, thin as thread, strong as hope. The twist was simple and vast at once. The hunters were not the only ones listening. Kindness had become a beacon, and the stars had answered.